To the third week of the Wellbeing Talk series. And tonight we're going to be talking about building healthy relationships. And so in this 4-part Wellbeing Talk series, we're focusing in on personal well-being. So there's 4 elements of that. We have achievement, purpose, building healthy relationships, and instilling a sense of resilience. And so tonight I have the privilege of introducing Yohannes Berhane, who's going to be talking about building healthy relationships. And so at the end, we're going to do a Q&A, and Yohannes and I are going to be able to talk and answer any questions you have. So feel free to put questions in the chat, whatever you would like, and we'll get those answered at the end. And so everyone, here's Yohannes.
Please, thank you. Everyone, so like Liz said, my name is Yohannes Berhane. Liz, great job on saying my last name. Yeah, I don't say it often. It's a little difficult. But yeah, I'm an OU graduate. I graduated in 2019. And yeah, I'm honored. Thanks for having me here to talk about building healthy relationships. And so just to get started, I just want to pose like what even is like a healthy relationship and like why do healthy relationships matter? I mean, we could just stop and just think like, well, think of every relationship that's ever went wrong in your life, and just don't do what happened there, and that's the end of it. No, just kidding. But healthy relationships actually, how I would define them, they're trusting, they're life-giving, meaning they don't suck the life out of you. They support you and they encourage you, and they contribute to health in the other aspects of health in your life. So I would say there are at least 5 domains of health to your holistic human being, and that'll be emotional health, mental health, physical health, spiritual health, and relational health, the one I'm talking about. And so relational health builds the other aspects of health in your life, considered in a holistic way. So yeah, I also think that healthy relationships provide meaning to your life. Like when you think like what matters the most in your life right now, a lot of it is relationships. A great thing that I do, not often, because it's kind of dark, not always, but it motivates me, is to just picture my funeral and picture what would I hope to have done by then, or what are the things I would have hoped to have said by then, and like who do I want there, and what do I want them to say about me? And it's all centered around people. It's not really about like the bungee jumps and going and traveling the world and stuff. It's really all about the people that we meet and get to love and know in this life. And so, yeah, they provide meaning into your life, and we're not meant to be alone. I think as humans, we're just relational people. Like we need other people, no matter how of a macho person you are and think you don't need anyone. I think you definitely do need someone. And meaningful relationships also give you purpose. Like I guess as Nick was talking last week, he talked about purpose. I think relationships also build into your purpose because they take the attention off of yourself, and at the same time they like nurture you and feed into your other aspects of health, as I was saying before. And it reminds me of a Gandhi quote when he says, find yourself in the service of others. It's where we find like purpose and meaning in our relationships with people and living our lives for others. And I love that because it allows you to live a much freer life, meaning you don't have to worry about like what people care about you all the time or what people are thinking about you. If you have meaningful relationships, because you don't have to try to prove yourself all the time. You don't have to worry about like all the problems that you have going around like all the time. But imagine if you just were able to live feeling empowered, as if someone like truly knows you and someone like really cares about you. And I think that's exactly what meaningful and healthy relationships do for us. They help fulfill 2 of our deepest desires as human beings. And I think that the 2 of them are, one is to be known and one is to be loved. And man, like some of us aren't even aware of like those desires, to just be known and to be loved. And it's really sad when you think about it sometimes, because there's lots of people you might be in the room or online, just wondering like if there's someone out there that like actually cares about you. Is there someone out there that cares about me? And it's actually daunting in our society, and it's killing us. Like the rates of suicide and depression and anxiety are increasing and accelerating. And especially within technology, there are multiple studies linked to depression and anxiety with screen time and social media. And so I think moving forward, I hope that we could spend less time interacting on our phones, but more times in the lives of others. And this line, I feel like I've heard people say all the time, or something along the lines of it, is just how we are so connected, more so in fact than we have been in the history of humanity. But like at the same time, we're so lonely. Because a lot of our relationships just aren't deep. They don't have depth. And so, yeah, I think to be known and loved is to have a much fuller and meaningful life, and sharing that with other people. And so, yeah, that's really, and one thing about that is I really believe that meaningful relationships are like the true wealth of life, honestly, like in terms of like riches and gold and I mean experiences too. I think really what really gives you meaning and fulfilled life are relationships and the most important relationships that you have. So yeah, let's talk about building some healthy relationships. I just have a few points and we'll just get rolling with those. So my first point about building healthy relationships is to be healthy yourself. It's not to be 100% at your best health, but it's really the idea of acknowledging what you need as a person, acknowledging who you are and like what is going on inside of you. Something I like to consider sometimes is just ask myself like how known are you, just to either remind myself that I am known, or like actually for some people it might be like man, like nobody knows me, like on a scale of 1 through 5, like how known are you? 1 being nobody knows me, 5 being man, there's like 1 or 2 people or a lot more that know everything about me. And man, that's really cool if you are someone who could say like there are people out there that know everything about you. Because there's a lot of people that are lonely. And yeah, and if you are lonely, I hope that by the end of this talk, I can encourage you to go out and build relationships and be with other people. But yeah, just knowing what you need and knowing your help and being aware of yourself will help your actual relationships and building them. One, because you'll know like what you're projecting. You'll know what you need in those relationships. Sorry, I'm just throwing my notes. Yeah, just being aware of like what is happening inside of you. And it's kind of this idea of self-awareness, and self-awareness is just the awareness of like what's going on inside of you. And then having that stronger sense of self-awareness will lead to better self-management in how you manage yourself. And that will lead to social awareness, your awareness of like what's going on in other people, like how do you gauge the room? How do I gauge like what Connor's thinking like right now, or how we're interacting? And that will lead to a better relational management, how you manage your relationships and conflict and team building, and just being there for other people. And I used to be terrible at this, truly. But ironically, my point is to basically know yourself before you can build healthy relationships. But essentially, the way I kind of helped come to terms with like knowing like what's going on inside of me was someone actually coming into my life and asking me like, hey, what's going on? Like asking me tons of questions that I was like, oh, I didn't really know I should think about that. Things like just like how are you? Like what matters to you? Like what are things that you care about? So things like that, and it really changed my life. Just having someone come into my life like that. And he was more of a mentor, and now he's like one of my best friends to this day. And so yeah, essentially what I'm saying is just to go deeper with other people is one, just like know yourself. It's important to know who you are. And next, I think in order to build healthy and meaningful relationships, as you are in these relationships with people, also I never really defined what kind of relationships I'm talking about, which I really any type of relationship with a human being, it could be an acquaintance, close friend, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever partner or spouse you have, a familial relationship. I think these principles apply across the board with your relationships. But this one, it's going to sound contradictory, but it's really not, and I'll explain why. And this principle is to simply like consider the needs of other people, the people of the relationships that you're in. Consider their needs more important than your own needs. And you're like, wow, Yohannes, you just said to have healthy relationships, you have to like know your needs and like be healthy yourself. But it kind of goes full circle as you are caring about someone else more so than you care about yourself. Like I said before, it's so much more freeing. And like healthy relationships are actually giving. It's like you're looking at the person and you're thinking, how can I love them? And how can I better them? How can I be there for them? How can I just help them in life and just walk alongside life with them? And that gives you so much more purpose and meaning in the relationships that you have. And I totally believe that. And it's played out so like just undeniably in my life, like just the idea of applying this principle to my life. And I mentioned that idea of loving someone, and in the Greek, there's like a few different types of, or different words for love. And the love that I'm talking about is the word agape, and that word means unconditional, selfless, and sacrificial. And I think in terms of like building healthy relationships and applying this principle, like that's the type of love that I mean. It's not like, oh, I love steak, I love walks on a sunny day, but it's like a really unconditional love that's like always there, like you're giving it to someone else. And it totally really benefits the other people around you. And it benefits yourself as well, to be able to do that with other people, to say, I want to like love someone unconditionally, like with another person, which I'll get there later. The idea of like doing that with other people, that's totally life-giving. But yeah, so you're looking at them and you're wondering like, how can I better them? How can I support them? And in turn, that actually like really supports you. And you'll have a very like giving relationship, because it's not like you're trying to take something from them all the time, but it's more so you're trying to give. And in turn, and generally speaking, people want to give to you as well, as you interact with people. Yeah, and man, like I mentioned before, like how this has played out in my life, and I've had some friends who really love me unconditionally. Even the friend I mentioned earlier who was just telling me, asking me questions, he's one of my best friends. Like, he's someone who really was just there for me when, like, he always was giving, like, himself to me, and just being there for me in ways no one else was. And this was when I was in high school. So, and it's crazy, I still talk about him to this day, like someone like a mentor to me like that. But yeah, he was someone who just showed me what unconditional love is like, outside of like my mom and my grandma. And it just kind of changed my world, because I realized, one, like I could have that with other guys. And I think just going back to some of the issues I discussed earlier, like depression and suicide and anxiety, like guys struggle with that a lot more. And I think a part of it is because guys just aren't that good at making relationships when compared to women in general. Like women, I think, are a lot better at just having better and healthy relationships than guys. And so, and it's like guys in the room, so just take that to heart and just be open with other guys, and girls keep killing it. So yeah, I want to talk briefly, just practically about like how to build some of those relationships. And first, in order to do that, got to consider like the state of your own relationships, and yeah, where are they at right now? Like how healthy are they, and like how, like what's like their status in terms of like, I'm going to build an analogy for you guys, but in terms of like the depth of the relationship, how close you are to them, and if it's surface level, it's really deep. So I'm going to grab this handy whiteboard. Kind of an analogy that someone showed me before. But I'm gonna build a house. You guys, oh yeah, you guys see? All right, cool. I'm no Picasso, so bear with me. So we got the house. Okay. Boom. And then here's the yard. Okay. Yep, here's the yard. And then we got the foundation underneath all of this. And so how much walk through this is you got the yard. These represent like friends who are like acquaintances. Sorry guys, I'm no Picasso. Yeah, so the yard you have like acquaintances, people you don't really know that well. But they're nonetheless, they're in your life, they know your name, you know theirs. And some of them are just friends that you haven't like really got to know that well. And then the house, you have like your close friends, like people who actually know you, people who you spend time with, people that you like really enjoy like getting to know. And it's starting to be like some of that agape love in your relationship where you guys are like really just loving each other. You've probably been through some conflict and been through some hard things together, but you came out of it. Or you've just been there with them for lots of time. And so now we got the foundation, and these are your very deep and like intimate relationships. And a lot of us don't really have these one, because a lot of us are just younger, but nonetheless they are there. You might have them with your parents, or a lot of people have them with their like husbands or wife or their spouse. But yeah, like these are like your deepest relationships, the ones that you can lean on, the ones that you can rely on. And I might even draw like some cracks in this foundation because man, you've really been through some hard things, but nonetheless, you guys stayed solid through it all. And so these are for like this example in my talk, just 3 types of relationships that we have. And I just want to talk about like moving across the board. So like from going from the yard into the house, and then from the house like to the foundation. Really, you started the foundation, but for this, in terms of building a house. But anyways, for the analogy, we're going to work towards the foundation in terms of depth. And so I would love for like some of you guys' input, if that's cool. If we were able to just open the discussion for like what are some ways that you guys think you could bring someone in from the yard into the house. I would feel free to open it up to the people.
And anyone on the chat, if you want to answer Yohannes's question, I can take notes and then verbalize those over to Yohannes as well. We have some in-person guests, but we also have some people tuning in virtually. So if you'd like to respond, Yohannes, could you go ahead and repeat that question one more time for our viewers online?
Yeah, for sure. So how do we move in terms of depth and relationships from the yard to the house? So your acquaintances and like friends that you're kind of close, like you just know, they know your name, you know theirs. How can you allow them on the yard to go into the house, and in the house you have like people who are closer friends, like people you've been through stuff with, and then how does that go into like the depth? So basically, like how do you move deeper and deeper? Essentially, that's my question: is how do we go deeper in our relationships? So yeah, feel free to like. I guess we could just start with the yard. Like, how do we move from the yard into the house? Connor.
Ask good questions.
Ask good questions. Yeah, that's a good answer. Like a lot of people just don't ask them.
After asking good questions, listen well. Be a good listener.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, listen well. You'd be surprised how many people just want to be heard.
I like the idea of sharing a meal together.
Sharing a meal together? Yeah, that's such a practical and easy way to really just move someone from the yard into the house.
I'm gonna second the active listening. I think what you said, Yohannes, is spot on. We as humans have a tendency to want to talk about ourselves, and it's genuine, but at the same time, we struggle as humans with active listening and really listening to hear someone versus listening to respond. There's a huge difference in that, and when you can show that response, you build that rapport and that empathy. So I second that. I think that's a huge point for letting someone from the yard into the home. Do we have any responses in the chat? I definitely want to allow for anybody in the online to contribute. Otherwise, we'll keep moving along here. Andrew Thompson, thank you for the response. Andrew says, be genuine and be intentional with your listening. That's a really good point, Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Liz?
And I think another thing is just, like Akash said, with inviting over or maybe sharing a meal, I think also showing up for that other person if there's an invitation maybe that they gave to like go to like a group event, or if they wanted to invite you over somewhere. So I think it's that two-way street.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Yeah, thanks for that. So now let's just think like, all right, they're in the house. And you'll have tons of people out in the yard in your life, like tons of like acquaintances and people that you kind of know, but in the house, like it's got a capacity really. There's not that many people that you can call your close friends. And really you're good if you have like a few, like 1 to 3, in your house, in terms of like your close friends in your life. But what about like the foundation? Like these are ones that are like rock solid relationships, ones that you can depend on. So like how might people that are close to you become like some of those deep and intimate relationships? Like there's only a few, like probably 3 tops in your entire life. So yeah, let's talk about that. How do you move from like the house to the foundation in terms of going deeper in your relationships? Yeah.
I feel like it's all about being there, doing everything we said to get from the yard into the house, but doing that just, over time, really building that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, time. It really takes time.
For me, I think about the closest relationships that I have, and what brought those relationships to the next level was echoing what he said, was the experiences we went through together. We went through them together. I recall memories of, friends from years past. And I'm like, remember this time when we went through this, and that to me is going through those experiences deepens those bonds.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like working through conflict together is a big thing that moves someone to the foundation. Specifically, and like succeeding through it on the other side.
Yeah, like we go through hard things like in life, and that's really kind of what these cracks represent. With the hard things that we go through in life, but we like can rely on those deep, intimate relationships to help get us through those. Liz?
Yeah, and I think also kind of with that, just like fighting for each other and not letting circumstances ever like separate kind of the bond. So I think about my best friend who is in that foundational part, who's like one of my most intimate best friends, like knowing that we have gone through so much over time, but also we've fought for each other. We've been separated in certain times, but we've known each other's hearts, and we've had grace with one another when we didn't always get to have communication because of not being in the same location, and it might have been more difficult, but constantly like trying to fight to know each other's hearts no matter what the circumstances.
Right, yeah, just actually putting the effort and the work and fighting for it, like you said, literally a fight. I'm not married, but I know that marriage is, like for people who are married and want to do that, like it is one of those things that you have to fight over time to stay in it. From what I hear and what I've seen some pretty nasty conflicts in marriage, but it was a fight and a choose to like stay together. And like I love you, like I'm not going anywhere. And after you trust someone a while, you see that like, man, this person is not going anywhere. And I think that's also a very important principle in like these depth and deep relationships, is you can like see that, man, they're not going anywhere. But yeah, you guys said like some really, were there any on the online? Don't want to leave
Anybody have any additional online? I'll contribute one that I had being a manager of students. Is I talk a lot about our team relationships and our team dynamic, and I use the acronym TEAM, together everyone achieves more. So when I bring students onto our team, they may come in as a fitness instructor, but I let them know, hey, you might be doing your own gig over here, but there's going to be a time when you're going to need a sub and you're going to need to reach out, and them recognizing that relationship is the most important one that they're going to be building during their time with us is that team relationship. So for me, I think about and tie that into my work of how that's super important for building a culture. But yes, is there anybody in the chat that has anything additional that they want to add for how you really take that relationship to the next level? Hearing none, I think we're good. Johannes, to go ahead and keep going. Yeah.
Thanks again for all you guys' contributions. Like you guys said, pretty much anything I was going to say for the most part. I just love hearing other people talk as well. One, because I get tired of hearing myself talk, and two, everyone has so many experiences and things to really offer to each other. And pretty much the things I would say is moving from the surface level to the foundation, to the depths and deep and intimate relationships. Just being vulnerable. Actually letting the people in on what is going on actually letting people in on what is going on inside your life and in your heart. Letting people know, man, I'm struggling. And that will really take it to the next level. And it could easily be done in a room full of people as well, with someone you don't even know. Just by simply saying, you hear it in songs all the time. I'm in a room full of people, but I feel so lonely. There's probably someone else in that room who feels the same way. So actually going up to them and just saying, what's up? My name is, what's your name? And I know it's not that deep, but a lot of times in our situations, we are feeling certain things that there are other people that are feeling the same way. So if we take the initial step and go across the room to someone else, it'll help us and help other people along the same way.
We had somebody type in the chat here saying, thank you, Catherine, for chiming in here. Kind of goes with everyone's saying, but intentionally initiating conversation that's deeper than surface level. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Right. Meaningful conversations, meaningful relationships, for sure. Yeah, and having intentionality, and just with the people you talk to, and kind of, leaving some of the small talk, getting past small talk pretty much as fast as you can. Me, I really don't like small talk, but some people love it and are really good at it, and it's not always bad. Sometimes it's actually really good to be able to do small talk well, but me, I'm all right, I want to get past the small talk and actually get to know you and see what you care about, and what matters to you, because that's really another way to go deeper with someone, figuring out what matters to them. And you have to be intentional for that and be able to have meaningful conversations. And so you guys said listening and time spent together. Another one is just being inviting. If you have relationships with other people, be inviting. Let other people in on that. Because there are people out there that don't have that and would love to be in on what you have. And after a while, if you just sit there, we just sat in this room and everything was really great, and we didn't have anyone to share that with, it would get stinky after a while. And so be inviting, and man, that really will change your relationships, because a lot of times in our relationships that we've had a long time, things are just the same and it's over, the same thing over and over again. You're all right, I think I want to kind of piece out of this. But if it's dynamic and you're growing together and you're inviting people into it, it's exciting, and there's lives being changed, and man, more experience shared and helping people go through hard things together. So yeah, those are kind of that's my spiel on going from the yard to the house to the foundation. But yeah, just to wrap it up, this is work. As I said before, building relationships is hard, and it's also risky. It's risky business. The deeper the relationship, the deeper the risk. All the things that I said that are great in those relationships, someone can take that and really care for you, or someone can take that and just twist it and really hurt you. So and the deeper that is, the deeper the hurt is. But on the flip side of that, I'm going to say the risk is much greater to not have deep relationships. There's a woman named Bronnie Ware, and she has a book, and I believe it's titled The Regrets of the Dying. and she has 5 top regrets that people say, and I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but a lot of them dealt with relationships, like not telling someone they loved them enough, or not spending time with people that they cared about, or wishing they never worked so hard in order to be with people they care about. And so like I think the risk of like not having those relationships is a lot more worse than the risk of like being hurt in relationships. Yeah, and just reiterating on the fact that like meaningful, healthy relationships lead to a more full and purpose-driven life. Just going back to like picturing your funeral, like what do you hope to see there? Like what do you hope that people would say about you? And what do you hope that you would have said by then? And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I just want to encourage you guys to go and live like with intentionality and make more meaningful relationships. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
All right, we're going to give our speaker a chance to grab some water real quick, folks. We are going to transition into the Q&A portion here briefly, so we'll let Liz and Yohannes get set up here. And we're going to have an opportunity for Liz to ask some questions over to Yohannes, and vice versa for you all in the chat. If you have questions as well that you want to know more on, now is going to be a perfect opportunity for us to have a good conversation about this. So, Liz, Yohannes, the stage is yours.
Perfect. Yohannes, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And thank you also for just being able to talk so much and wanting to engage online and the in-person crowd here, just with thinking about in our own relationships too, like what is important to know and how to move forward with kind of acquaintances and growing deeper into relationships. And so I think that adds in kind of to the intersectionality, right, that we keep seeing about personal well-being and connecting, like kind of making meaning and purpose of these relationships and how that affects your overall like well-being too, like having good community, having healthy relationships and people that know you fully. I loved that you said, being the 2 most important things is being known and loved, and being able to reciprocate that with people around you. If that is just, the group of friends that you have that might be just acquaintances, that can still happen, but also how amazing it is to have those close and intimate friends and how needed that is too, just for your own well-being. So yeah, just thank you for sharing. And so right now, please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat for us. Yohannes will be answering. I have a set of questions. And yeah, Drew.
So mine just kind of went over to how you were talking about intentionality and how you don't like small talk. So how basically like trying to be intentional, how do you open up like an initial conversation with someone given that you don't like, all that small talk, little stuff?
I mean, it really depends on what I'm doing. Because I don't really have like a set of questions that I'm like, oh, I want to go deeper. Like what, I don't have a set of questions that I will like have in my pocket to go deeper with people. But depending on what I'm doing in the context, I'm always going to be thinking, not always, but like one, it's really listening. And I think if you are listening fully, like you'll be able to come up with those questions yourself and like be able to spark interest or like thoughts that you might want to ask or like be thinking like, why does that person say that? Like, why does that person do that? Or like, what's their reasoning behind that? In terms of like thinking like, oh, like figuring out like who they are and what matters to them. Another like kind of principle behind like getting to know people deeper past small talk is thinking like I want to know who they are more than I want to know like what they do. So yeah, and especially like kind of also thinking like if you have time to have a deeper conversation as well. So yeah, just thinking who the person is over what they do. That might lead to something deeper. Yeah.
How do you keep a relationship intentional and deep with distance as a factor?
With distance? Well, I'm actually in a long distance relationship right now, and we've been together over a year now. And it's kind of the same thing. It's intentionality. We could text all day over nothing, or we could schedule some time into our busy calendars to actually talk about things that like mean something to us to talk about. Like, hey, like what's been going on that's been hard? What's been something that's been good? And where do you need like support and how can I be supporting you? Just making sure you have one, prioritize this relationship, and two, make sure you ask things that are meaningful instead of just talking about like the day-to-day busy things. Talk about like what's been on their hearts lately. And I feel like most of my relationships are long distance actually, especially graduating from Athens. Man, like you graduate from Athens and people go all over the country because Athens is this like bubble. Not a lot of the people you meet here in Athens stay here. So it's prioritizing them and being intentional with your conversations.
I have a question. For students that are going through the unprecedented times that we're facing right now, that haven't even had a chance to set foot on campus, on Ohio University's campus, what advice would you give to them in a different world that we're living in right now, where we are more distant physically because of a global pandemic, to really dial in and build meaningful relationships when it might be a little bit more difficult to have some of those in-person organic interactions?
Right, so basically like how can someone who's on campus build relationships? One, I would say there are people that, like in terms of using my analogy, that are on the yard, people that you're kind of acquainted with, and you might have their number. One, just reach out to them and like trying to get to know them a bit more. Two, I would say, man, it is hard, but what's worked for me, and I don't have the perfect answer for this, but what has worked for me is finding a hobby that I like doing, and I've been meeting people through that, either via social media or like actually doing my hobby. And specifically, mine is outdoors, so I see people doing it. So I do a lot of mountain biking, and I meet people through that. And like, I'll see them on the trails, and it's distance and it's safe. And I've actually like gone on a trip with someone I met like through that recently, actually. But yeah, I would say like find something that you enjoy doing and look up groups around that on like Facebook and Instagram, and actually reach out to them, because social media isn't all evil. Once you get past the I want to like see what they're doing, but actually not know them. If you actually want to know them, it becomes a great tool to actually meet up in person.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think kind of going with that too, just like taking chances and being brave. So just like you said, you met someone and then you went on a trip with them and you ended up having like a really great time doing something that you both love. And so connection can continue to build through that. So I think it's just also taking the risk to invite someone, or just take the chance of being brave, even if it's uncomfortable. I think that could spark a close friendship that you wouldn't even know if you weren't like brave. And so I think that's so important too.
Yeah, it really takes courage. Relationships take courage, for sure.
Absolutely. One question that I had is, why is it important to grow close to people who are different than you? And so like if that is like in different like majors, or if that's in different ages, because I know you talked about like a mentor that you had, but why is that important?
The easy answer is because it's awesome. I love knowing people who are different than I am. One, because our experiences are limited, just as we're on this earth, and there are so many people out there who come from literally, there's billions of people on this earth, like living completely different lives. They have so many experiences and values to share that we just don't even know are out there, that they could come into our lives knowing people that are different. And especially even in America, I think it's needed more than ever right now. Back to social media, I have a love-hate relationship with it, but I think Facebook's algorithms and how people are easily becoming these echo chambers of you click one video and next thing you know you see a gazillion other videos just like that. And so people are only hearing the same things over and over again. It's important that we actually in person, even like someone on the left and someone on the right, like if they're hearing very opposite things on Facebook, And if they actually come together in real life and have a conversation on what's actually going on, we might be able to reach a common ground and move somewhere together and show that, like, even though we have different views, we come from different places, our skin color is very different, we could still love each other and still have a genuine relationship, and it doesn't have to be this divisive thing. It's funny, like even one of my roommates came up to me one time and he was like, yeah, man, I saw on Facebook this guy is like a super like far right person, and my roommate is like a very far left person, and their rooms are right next to each other. I'm like, oh dang, that's kind of crazy, man. But like now they are actually like really good friends, and they always are doing stuff together. And like in my personal experience as a black man, like I've got to share like what that is like to lots of other white people who, especially in this over the summer with George Floyd happening and all that. And there was a lot of healing and reconciliation through that. So I'd say there's so many benefits to getting to know people who are different than you, whether it be racially, socioeconomically, skill sets, interests. So there's so many benefits. It just makes your life so much more rich and full.
Thank you for sharing that. I think even just with you talking, I just imagine looking at kind of your analogy too. Just like thinking about just inviting, right? And like who's filling your home. And just like, I would want the diversity in my home too. And so I think that that's so important because of everything you just said. How enriching is that to who you are, to continue to build community around you, that you can just continue to learn from one another. And so I think that's important. That's also important, right, for students who are eventually going to be coming onto campus or already there, like being able to surround themselves with as many different people, like no matter what that difference is, just having that to make this experience as, you know, an undergraduate or graduate student even more fulfilling, knowing that once they enter into like post-grad life too, they're gonna be out in the real world, and it's not gonna be just kind of maybe the bubble that sometimes college does feel like. I think that initially growing in that desire to have diverse, healthy relationships is so important to the rest of their lives. And so, yeah, I think that's huge.
Going off of that, I'd also say, like, if you are in college right now, especially at Ohio University, like, you're like, I guess probably not as much so in the pandemic, but I would say in this space and in this time of your life, I don't think it will ever be more easy to build like relationships with people. It's tough, like here, like if you go up to someone and you say hi, and next thing you know, you got a close friend, they're already in the house. And it's a really cool thing that the culture is here. So if you go to OU now, take advantage of that.
Yeah, perfect. Remember to feel free to ask any questions on the chat, and also anyone else. But another question I have, do you think it's okay to grow apart from certain relationships that you may have in your life, if they might not seem healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's a relationship that you think just isn't, after you've thought about it, is it worth actually fighting for? Because as we talked before, like it takes effort to build relationships that are meaningful and healthy. Is that relationship worth the effort of putting in the work? And if it's just sucking the life out of you and draining you, it might be time to take a step back, at least. Take a step back first, and then go from there, like whether you should walk away from that relationship or lean into it and fix the issues there. But yeah, I mean, all the time, there's so many relationships that are toxic and relationships that even like stem from gossip. It's so easy to really just become friends with someone, or like superficial friends, by just talking about someone else, like talking about how like bad they looked, or man, like Yohannes' talk was trash, and then you guys become friends. But like in the end, like that relationship was built on something that was pretty toxic, and I don't think it would go well. And I've seen it not go well plenty of times. that it's just superficial, and just not healthy. And I'm seeing like people walk away from that and be like, oh, that was not good. It's like a breath of fresh air, walking away from that relationship. So yeah, I think there's totally great time to walk away from relationships that are just sucking the life out of you and toxic. But first, like, maybe you just take a step back before you just walk right out the door to consider where you guys are at.
Absolutely. I think that another thing about what it looks like, kind of talking about freedom in relationships, I think that could go both ways, right? With like the freedom of being able to be honest if it is a relationship that might not be healthy, like being able to be courageous enough to walk away or not continue to have kind of that relationship in your life. But I think it's beautiful, so much of what we talked about, just the freedom and vulnerability, and being able, the importance of vulnerability too. So I guess just another question that I have is, what was something that was important to you for your relationships in college to build that health and growth in your relationships?
In college, what was important? Yeah, let's see. I had lots of relationships here, but there were a handful of them that truly mattered to me. And what mattered was the idea of like, could I be vulnerable with them and how they would receive like me actually like being vulnerable. Because I took the step of like letting people in, and it was kind of like, okay, now that it's in their hands, like how they respond, and do they choose like actually love me and fight for me. Because there's lots of relationships where you see them and run into them at the dining hall and it's all great, but like you don't really, they don't really know me. And it's like, do these people actually want to know me? Are they listening to me? And I think that's a big part, is like gauging, like, do they want to know you? Do they want to care about you? And if you feel that, like, and you're going deeper with them, and it's like, okay, now I know them a lot, and I feel known by them. So yeah, I think that was a very important thing, was just like, man, do these people like want to hear about me? And once I figured out the answer was yes, it definitely made my relationships much more meaningful and enjoyable here. Yeah.
Love that so much. And I think another thing is just thinking about you talking about now in post-grad life, right? Like the importance of continuing that relationship with your mentor. I think that kind of, what does that look like to continue like after college too, like continuing to build closer to those friendships when, you know, like busy schedules come about and you have work and maybe you don't have as much time perhaps when you did in college. What has that looked like to think about how, I guess, you personally continued growing in your friendships, but also, yeah, in making time for even, you know, your long distance relationship
Right,
too.
yeah. It's a grind. It's actually been, it's really difficult. It's a challenge, absolutely. One, because my actual job is very relational. So I'm always building new relationships just with the type of work I do. And so, and also like focusing on relationships that I have in the past while building new friendships in the city that I'm in. It's hard not to be spread too thin. But as I was saying earlier, it's just like thinking back to, okay, what are the relationships that actually matter to me the most? And there's lots of relationships that I have where I don't need to talk to them every week or even every month, and we'll still be like good friends once I see them. But there are a few people, and some of those people that are in like that foundation part of my relationships that I want to prioritize and actually put in the effort of calling them. And it could be like once a week or multiple times a week, but even just considering like how much time you have in a day, like it's 24 hours in a day. It could be a 10-minute phone call just to say, hey, I've been thinking about you, how's it going? Or putting like an hour on your calendar to actually catch up on FaceTime, which is what it's looked like to me, and actually like scheduling out time. Because in college, I didn't have to think about scheduling time. It was like, all right, let's go. we're going to the dining hall, or come over to my house. You don't need to study right now. Like, it's fine. But now it looks a lot like, okay, I'm hitting this person up, and I got to schedule some time to be with them and talk to them and hear about their lives, or scheduling a trip to look forward to. That's actually one thing that I love, is putting something on the calendar where we actually get together and share an experience. It's just so good to have something to look forward to that you know is just going to be so good with the people that you really love. So yeah, it's like putting stuff on the calendar to go and see them and do something with them, and then also in the weekly, monthly, like setting up times to talk to them.
That's right. Yeah, I've definitely learned that too, just going into virtual life, working and doing school, and just understanding too how it's been really cool, the conversations I've had with friends about, yeah, kind of having grace with each other, knowing like, okay, it might be 2 weeks until I get to have a conversation with you, but I want that conversation and I want to make time. And so I think that I've seen more of the intentionality, right, that we've continued to talk about more than I ever had, even with long distance friendships too, but also even people 5 minutes down the road, because I feel like, right, we've all experienced through the pandemic that even if we're all in the same area, we're not really seeing each other at all. And so, but still being able to say like, hey, we can still celebrate like birthdays or holidays and things like over Zoom or over a video call. And I know in my experience, and I don't know if you felt this with any of your friends too, but just knowing I felt like the relationships, talking about kind of the familial side, I know for me, that connection with my sisters has grown even more because I felt like the intentionality of just being on a video call and being able to like not get to just leave or walk out the door, walk out of the room, and seeing how important that is. So like, you only have a certain amount of time, right? Like you're not spending the whole day or something with certain people. And so I don't know if you've seen that at all with any of the people in your life. So I think that's just so important, just thinking about what questions am I asking? How am I like showing that I care for these people in my life that I do? Like I think I've just learned to become so much more intentional. So I'm glad that that's been a huge theme of what you've been talking about.
Yeah, for sure. And even just thinking about that, just like actually putting in the effort to call someone, I've been thinking or wrestling with this a lot lately, just the differences between active resting and passive resting. And just like passively resting would be like me sitting on my phone scrolling, or just like on Netflix and just like being like totally mindless and just zoning out. But that's okay for like an hour, 2 hours tops. But like there are other types of rest, like going to the gym, that actually make you feel refreshed afterwards, or like picking up the phone and calling someone. Like it might seem like it's work to do, but afterwards you're like, oh, that was so good. That was like so good for me. Or like reading books. Like I wasn't always a big reader. Now I try to read a lot more. And so doing things like that would actually make me feel a lot more refreshed. That don't sound that restful to me afterwards, but
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So if there's anyone else in the chat that would like any questions to ask, Kyle.
You talked about how meeting people with different views or different experiences is amazing, but what's the mindset you have when you know that person's view is the complete opposite of your stance, whether it's politically or socially or something along those lines? How do you approach that person and still be able to have a good conversation and build a relationship with that person?
I think, depending on the types of differences in your goal and wanting to be in their life, or the goal of your relationship, I think a big part of it is listening, and actively listening, not just waiting on your response to tell them like your point, but actually just giving them the chance to share and talk about like what they want to say, because people want to be heard, but also when people are heard, they develop respect for you, even if they have totally different opinions, and then we might want to hear yours, and we'll be able to have some common ground through listening first, because there will be times where people just assume stuff about you based on just looking at you, how they first look at you, or the things you're affiliated with. And so just being able to listen and then actually share like who you are would definitely provide some space for an actual relationship and getting past some of those barriers of differences. So that's my take on that.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think that was a great kind of final question. If there are any other questions, please let us know. But if not, Yohannes, I just wanted to say thank you again for just taking time to share and be vulnerable with us too, in your own experience, but also in just ways that you've learned just with kind of, life and everything about what it looks like to build healthy relationships and setting the example for these students and all of us to, it's a journey for the rest of our lives of continuing to learn what does it look like to build healthy relationships. So thank you again for driving to Athens to be able to share about this element of personal well-being. And so I think that's about it. But thank you everyone who streamed and for everyone that came today. And so once again, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone. To our viewers online, be on the lookout for the recording for this, and we'll be uploading it to our University Wellbeing and Recreation YouTube.